Good afternoon, everybody, and Professor Onset. I hope you all are doing well. Here's my presentation on the tool I used. Go from there. For this particular assignment, I used the tool of Google Slides as a presentation type and with lecture and engagement from students. And I know that's probably boring for some people, but it's one of those things that when it comes to PE, I think I can engage with students a little better. I like to do a lot of talking, so sometimes that's probably one of my points that I need to get better at is more listening sometimes. But either way, it's one of those things that I try to get kids engaged a little bit through a discussion. And in this class, we talked about healthy and unhealthy relationships for their exercise, and the class is called Exercise, Sport, and Science 2. So it's one of those things that's an easy way to start in the trimester, but I want to give them Google Slides for the easily accessible through Schoology. Why did I choose this tool? I like the tool because it gives a chance to follow along with the teacher. So if they want to, they can go right into Schoology, which is the school resource we use or platform we use, and they can jump right on there and get the link. It's right there if they want to follow along on their iPad or they want to follow along on the screen. It's up to them. But either way, it's easily accessible, easily to throw a link right in there. Give kids to use their iPad, which is a big thing, especially with our assignment that follows right after. Some asked actually within the classes if they could take notes, so their iPad's right there to take some of those notes or use some of those opportunities, so that was there. I chose this tool because it's the second week of the trimester and we're trying to gain a little bit of structure for the class and try to get kids spaced out with COVID and whatnot, keep their distance. Our district is very strict on keeping their distance. We actually have to spread kids out sometimes through classes when we come from advisory from the gym to do an advisory session, so the kids have to be really socially distanced. They can't be close together. I know that's probably a big thing amongst a lot of schools, but it's one of those things that we're trying to follow along, and usually have to wear a shield too, so it's definitely difficult. But either way, I chose that tool because it's, like I said, structure in the class. It's early on. We want to make sure they know that it's important to keep their distance in the class as well. But it is, it's difficult to get students to engage a little bit too. So it's one of those things that me talking at the beginning of the trimester with a little bit of engagement for them is probably the best to ease into it. I don't want them to jump right into it and have to speak too much on things, especially if they're uncomfortable, especially in a class where they're freshmen and they're still getting to know people in the school. So it's one of those things, like I said, a lecture type thing or talking through Google Slides is an important thing. Another piece I put is kids think physical education is all about exercise and PE teachers can't teach in the classroom sometimes. I know that's kind of a thing that people say, or at least I've heard. And so it's one of those things that's nice to them to show that we can be teachers and we can share different lecture stuff as well for them. It's also something that students in the classrooms as well as Zooming can virtually see. It's so weird that I have a Zoom set up on the PowerPoint, and then I have the actual PowerPoint and working through there. So it's one of those things that's easily accessible for all of us that they can see and follow along with. And so why do I think it's effective for this particular lesson? I think, like I said before, it's due to COVID and the learning model we are in. Students have had a hard time communicating with anything during masks, or anything during class or lessons, especially with masks. And this gives kids a chance to listen and feel comfortable without pushing them too much early on. And as you'll see as I go through this, I talk about this, and I want kids to be engaged a little bit. And I share some stories, and I try to find kids that I know that can maybe feel a little more comfortable. I know it's only early on in the trimester where I've known them for a week and a half at this point, so it's still trying to get to know some of these kids, and some of them I know from previous relationships. So it's one of those things that I was able to call on them and use them. But I think it's effective because it's easily accessible for them. They can go through and just take it real quickly, and the slides are only, I think 7-8 slides long is my PowerPoint. So it's one of those things I talk about through a lot of them, but it's not over the top. It's not super demanding from them. And I think with relationships being the premise of this trimester's class, it gives students a base and what they think of. We talk about jumping from elementary school to middle school to high school. And for them in the high school level, once they start to enter high school, we're trying to get them a base for what a healthy relationship looks like and an unhealthy relationship looks like. And in my class, I use healthy characteristics and I do unhealthy characteristics. And I tell them that it's not all the answers. All these characteristics are not the answers, and all these unhealthy characteristics are not all the answers. There's plenty more than that, but at least they can see them. And I talk about that. These are the ones that we as a FIAD staff agree that are important for these kids to know. So it's a big thing. And then as ninth graders, it's still new to the building. So when kids start to develop lifelong relationships, they need to know the difference between healthy and unhealthy. So it's important for us that they identify them, because some kids as ninth graders, and even me when I was a ninth grader, and I share that story with my classes, I didn't really understand the difference between a healthy and unhealthy sometimes. I maybe thought it was healthy, but it wasn't unhealthy, or wasn't healthy. So it's one of those things that I think that the effective way I go about is trying to talk to them and share my own life stories and my own life lessons. It's important for them. They can hear that. And I think that that's important, especially if you're willing to open yourself up to these kids early on in the trimester and get them a comfort level, or get them, hey, Mr. Sainty's being honest and he's trustworthy. He's sharing things about his own life. I think it's important, and it's super validating that they can hear that for them and they start to open up too. So it's a big piece. That's why I think it's an effective piece for this particular lesson. How does this tool improve your classroom management? I think for me, at the beginning of the trimester, like I said, we want to establish a structured environment, especially with kids, where they're sitting, what they're doing. And I think, like I said, if they can keep their distance at this point, it's a big thing. And this is a class that alternates from the PE in the gym and to the classroom every other day. So one day they're in the gym, one day they're in the classroom, one day in the gym and the classroom. So it's one of those things we want to establish that structure, because it's only our second time in here. And so having them sit in their assigned spots and talk to them and give them a structured thing is a big thing. And I think overall, it's a tool improves my classroom management by utilizing the 3 rules of Holly. I know we talked about those before, and mine are very similar to Holly, which I think is crazy great, but it's awesome. And I share that here, that within those 3 rules, the respect is a big thing. Like I try to get kids to understand. We even talked about respect in our relationships, but the respect piece is it gives students a chance to keep their focus on the teacher, not talk when they're grouped together, and respect the person who's talking. So it's one of those things that, like, when I'm talking, there's a respect fact going on, and they're not in a small group, because normally we keep them in groups of 4 in the classroom. But with this, like I said, beginning of the trimester with COVID, it's an easy way to develop that respect thing where they're focused on the teacher, or they're focused on the person talking in class, and it's important. I think the second piece is the rapport, like sharing stories. I shared some stories, like I said, opens up to kids, and I get them engaged somehow in a different way, on a different level. So I think that's important. Being honest with them about myself so they can open up too eventually. And then the relationships pieces. This is where I start to develop and build those relationships as much as I can. And that's the funny part, is we're actually talking about relationships. And I talk about the teacher-student relationship a little bit and how that's important. And people, I want them to know that they can ask me questions. And I use responsibility as well for one of my classroom rules, because I think it's important that kids understand that there's duties to perform. That's technically the definition of responsibility. But I think with classroom management, you start to talk about these 3, and then you add responsibility. It's hopefully creating a successful classroom management style. And obviously that changes, and it can change over time, but this is what I have right now, and it's been working, so I try to stick with it. How does this tool support the concept of growth mindset within your classroom? I ask some questions. I try to get them engaged a little bit. And the question I try to use the appropriate questions where it's not, a fixed mindset type thing. I'm looking to get them engaged in a different way. So I want to use the appropriate questions for them to answer, and they have to think about. And I use some scanning, another way to, try to scan and use their eyes to tell a little bit, I guess, which it's quite difficult with masks, but I'm starting to get better at picking up on their eyes and what they're smiling, or whether they're engaged, or whether we're seeing things. So I think that I can, with the growth mindset thing, is I can see with their eyes a little bit, hey, they did pick up on that topic I just was talking about it. But it's one of those things that it's still difficult, but I'm trying to work through it. And this tool supports growth mindsets by sharing stories outside their comfort zone, or personal stories that get them to think about the relationships they might have. Okay, it's one of those things that I want these kids to understand, that if I'm sharing a story, I'm being honest and upfront about it. I'm getting them to, probe and think it's a good thing. Kids learn about healthy and unhealthy relationships through a PowerPoint. Develop some questions for them. Okay, and I put in here, and I got to some of these questions in some lessons. I got to them and not. That's one of those things that maybe I can work on for next time, is trying to make that a focal point, is where I'm trying to get to. But when looking at relationships with parents, are your parents there to help? Like, I want them to know that. Like, are they, a question, are they there to help you? Because some kids are going to say fixed mindset. No, they're mean. They hate me. They want me to fail. They want me to, they want me to do this. They want me to do that. We want them to know, explain that, hey, your parents are there to help, or your teachers are there to help, or your friends are there to help in relationships. And then when looking at friendships or relationships with friends, what types are things willing to do to help them? Like, we want them to see the good side of things. Like, hey, how can I help my friend in a relationship? Well, here's some healthy characteristics of a relationship relationship. Here's some unhealthy. So they start to identify and pick up on those, and they create that mindset where it's a growth mindset where they're asking themselves the questions of growth-minded questions rather than fixed mindset. Or, hey, how can I help this person in this situation, or maybe question them in that situation. But either way, I try to provide to support the concept of growth mindset within this lesson that I provided. What changes? Last thing, what changes would I make?
Please call 37512.
What changes would I make? Sorry about this.
Please call 37512.
What changes would I make? If you use this tool or practice again with COVID, I feel like this needs to be presented this way. That's where I'm at right now. But obviously, there's some different opportunities for me. If without COVID, I think that you could go to stations like we have our stations. We could have them talk to each other about healthy and unhealthy relationships and their thing. I'd love to have partners where they talk about a healthy relationship with somebody and unhealthy. That's one of our assignments we give to them right now, where they normally get to talk about it, but now they don't get to talk about it. And or we could do a small group project we've done in the past too, where they're creating what does it look like for a healthy relationship and talking about other characteristics other than I talked about. But that's a different way to go. But otherwise, changes I'd make for my own self is how do I handle silence? I realized after watching myself speak, I would make it, be more patient with my kids when I ask, hey, what are some other healthy relationship characteristics? Well, here we go. What are some unhealthy ones? Well, here we go. And I sit there and I need to wait and be more patient within that. And I noticed that I say okay a lot, which means I'm not a big fan of quiet. I sit there and listen and wait, or try to listen and wait, and I say okay, and I move on, okay, and I move on. And it's one of those things I need to get better at, is just being patient and listening. Let kids think, process for a second. That awkward silence is something I'm trying to get better at. The second change I would make is, I made the switch already. How I ordered my slides. It's one of those things. I went from healthy relationship to how a relationship goes sour to unhealthy relationship characteristics, and then I went how to maintain a healthy relationship. Just keep the healthy relationship together, and then how to maintain that healthy relationship. Then I go to unhealthy relationship, and then I go how you handle conflict. So I ordered that better. I actually changed that in the middle of things, so that was good. And last change I thought I would make to this lesson is necessary to talk about tools for solving conflict. One of those things that sometimes can be too much for kids if they hear mediation. Well, that should be their result, their first thing they do if they have conflict. Maybe they should be, hear the mediation piece. And I don't know if it got shown in my video; it might have been too long. But either way, I want these kids to understand that the conversations that need to be had when it comes to conflict, that's how you resolve conflict, and teach these kids that it doesn't always have to be mediation, or it doesn't have to negotiate, or it doesn't have to compromise, or right away. It's got to be, hey, let's just have conversations and get these kids to understand that. So there's my lesson for today, that's my tool and my practice I use, and a little bit about it. Hopefully you took something away from it, or you need something from me. Please reach out and ask. I'd love to hear some questions. Have a great day, everybody.